The Arizona State Sun Devils will play a football game tomorrow. It will be for the Big 12 championship. It will be for a spot in the college football playoff. Those are all true statements that apply to the 2024 season for Kenny Dillingham, for Sam Levitt, for Cam Scatterbo, and the entire Arizona State football program. Did not think that would be something we would discuss into December, but here we are, less than 24 hours away from ASU taking the field in AT&T Stadium to take on Iowa State, with the backdrop being there's a spot in the college football playoff on the line. There's a chance if UNLV defeats Boise State, you could get a bye in the first round of the college football playoff, guarantee yourself to be one of the final 8 teams, and, oh, by the way, a decent chance that your first game in the college football playoff would be a de facto home game at the Fiesta Bowl. That's it. That is what is at stake tomorrow. All of that is going to be played out over the course of the entire day. And ASU is going to try to keep this magical run alive. So what is that going to look like? How are they going to do that? Well, I think in order to do that, we have to evaluate the opponent that they are facing. And that is the Iowa State Cyclones. And this is maybe not the best way to do this, but I do think there is some value in what we are going to do. I looked at the common opponents that these two teams played throughout the season, because you can learn a lot about how ASU played a certain team and how Iowa State played a certain team. And I will tell you, they had a bunch of common opponents. They both played Texas Tech. They both played Kansas, Utah, Cincinnati, UCF, Kansas State. That's a big sample size for us to look at. Okay, how did you do against Texas Tech? Well, both of them lost to Texas Tech. ASU lost by 8. Iowa State lost by 1, but Iowa State's loss was at home. Okay, so you maybe want to call that a wash. Kansas. ASU beat Kansas 35-31. Iowa State lost. They went to Kansas, but they lost by 9. Utah, ASU beat Utah by 8. Iowa State went to Utah, beat them by 3. Cincinnati, a 10-point loss for ASU against Cincinnati in Cincinnati. For Iowa State, it was a 17-point win. The caveat that we would throw on that game is no Sam Levitt. So that can't be a true indicator because Sam Levitt is playing tomorrow. UCF, they both beat UCF. ASU did it by 4. Iowa State by 3. Kansas State, they both beat Kansas State. ASU had a 10-point road win. Iowa State had an 8-point home win. These two teams are very, very similar. There isn't really an edge. There isn't really a resume where ASU played all those teams and blew the doors off of them and Iowa State struggled. There isn't. You can point to ASU beating Kansas, but Iowa State losing to Kansas. But then the Cincinnati game would be thrown back into your face. And then maybe you can say that Sam Levitt was out. Okay, and you both lost to Texas Tech. You lost by more to Texas Tech. These teams are incredibly similar. How similar? ASU, points per game on offense, 31st in the country. Iowa State offense, 30th in the country on offense and points per game. Defensively, ASU, 26th in the nation defensively in points per game allowed. Iowa State, 24th in the nation in points allowed per game. Do you see how close these teams are? I'd love it if we had just a prior game that we could go back to of when these two teams played each other, but we don't. We have resumes that are extremely similar. We have results that are extremely similar. The caveats can apply to both. And statistically, these two teams this season have been mirror images of one another. Mirror images. So what do you do with that? What do you do with two teams that offensively are basically the same and defensively, at least in terms of the scoreboard, have been the same all year long? You have to go to the margins. You have to go to the little things. You have to go to the small edges that you can get. You can't turn the ball over. You have to win the turnover battle. Look at how close these two teams are. The results that I just mentioned to you, these teams are very similar. They've handled similar opponents almost identical throughout the season. Statistically, throughout the year, basically the same on both sides of the ball in what they allow points-wise. They are extremely similar. You have to make sure that when you are that similar, don't give the extra team an added drive. Don't turn the ball over. Don't throw that brutal interception when you're driving into the red zone with a chance to cushion your lead or to take the lead. Don't throw that interception. Don't fumble the ball. You have to win the turnover battle. When you have two teams that are this close to one another, it's all about the little stuff. Who can control the line of scrimmage? Who can commit fewer penalties? Who can commit fewer turnovers? Who can get that big takeaway? That's it. That's the recipe. I'm not reinventing the game of football. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. But when the margins are this slim, it is going to come down to all of that little stuff. It is going to come down to coaching. Matt Campbell for Iowa State, been there, done that. He has been in these games, he has been in these moments, and he has succeeded in these moments. Kenny Dillingham, never been here, never done it yet. There's pressure that comes with that. Can Kenny Dillingham channel that pressure, or does that pressure for him, for his team, for everybody involved in this program that is at this stage, a stage that nobody thought they were going to get to this year? Can they handle that pressure? Or does that pressure lead to those penalties? Or does that pressure lead to those turnovers? Does that pressure allow those little things to pop up? Because if those little things do pop up, I think we're going to come in here with the recipe of ASU in the big moment had all the little things go wrong, and they lost to Iowa State. If all of the little things go their way, then I think we will be talking about a Big 12 championship ASU team that's playing in the college football playoff. There's nothing about Iowa State that scares me on paper. They're a very similar team. ASU has played harder teams in the last 3 weeks. I think BYU is better than Iowa State. I think the one thing, if you were going to take away something to say why the resumes give the edge to ASU, I look at Kansas State, who ASU and Iowa State both played within about 2 weeks of each other. So they played them at a very similar time of the year. It's one of the hard things to do about this because ASU played Kansas at a different time of the season than when Iowa State caught them, and the same goes for Cincinnati. Like, if you catch a team early in the year and then they get better as the year goes on, well, it's maybe unfair to compare those two. Kansas State, they played them at around the same time. Utah, for example, when ASU played Utah, Utah was ranked. By the time Utah rolled around on the schedule for Iowa State, everybody was out on Utah. But at the time ASU beat them, it felt like a bigger deal. It felt like a bigger win. Kansas State, they played them around the same time. Iowa State had an 8-point win at home. That's impressive. ASU went into Kansas State, went into Manhattan, had a 3-score lead, won by double digits. So if you were going to look at anything in recent history or from this season that you can point to, I would look at that Kansas State game and say, that makes me think that maybe ASU is better suited to beat Iowa State. But these teams the margins are razor thin. That means you got to be disciplined. That means you have to play the way you've played all year. You can't allow the moment, being in Jerry World, being in front of that large of a crowd with the championship on the line, with the college football playoff on the line. You can't allow any of that. And it's easy to say into the microphone. It's harder to do in practice. You have to just pretend it's another football game. You belong on that field with Iowa State. You are just as good as Iowa State. There's an argument to be made that you are the better football team than Iowa State. You can very easily win this football game. It's not a David and Goliath story. This is not a team that is 3 games better than you in the standings, and the Big 12 had a down year, and so you were the best of the rest. In fact, you, according to the standings, I believe, I'm just going to check it just to make sure, are the top of the Big 12 this year. You, the top of the Big 12. So you belong on that field tomorrow. You belong in that moment. You belong to be 4 quarters away from going to the college football playoff, from being able to call yourself Big 12 champions. And yes, ASU, there were 4 7-2 teams. Everybody won in the final week of the year. ASU, Iowa State, BYU, Colorado, all the 7-2 teams. ASU, better than all of those teams. The tiebreaker goes to ASU, meaning when you have that many teams combined, it goes down to resume, all the common opponents. That means ASU handled their business better than all of those other teams against their common opponents. They have the second longest winning streak in the conference. Their 5-game winning streak is only beaten by Baylor's 6-game winning streak to end the year. Guess what? ASU this season, 3-0 against teams in the AP, top 25. Iowa State can't say that. BYU can't say that. Colorado can't say that. ASU can say that. That is what ASU has in front of them. They beat Kansas State. They beat BYU. They beat Utah when they were ranked in the top 25. Any top 25 opponent that has been put in front of ASU this season, they have taken care of. What's to say Iowa State isn't the next team on that list? So you have to do the little things right tomorrow because you belong on that field. You are just as good, if not better, than Iowa State. I haven't actually looked at this. Vegas says you're the favorite to win the football game. ASU is a 1.5-point favorite tomorrow. Think about this. It opened at ASU minus 1.5, okay? And maybe there are some of you out there that aren't in tune with all of this sports betting stuff. But the line opened at 1.5 after we knew that it was Iowa State against ASU. We learned this week, after that line had opened at 1.5, ASU favored by 1.5, we learned after that line got set that Jordan Tyson was going to be out of the Big 12 championship. The line hasn't moved at all. That tells you Vegas thinks, yeah, it's a tough loss. We still think ASU is favored in the football game. We still think they are favored to win. ASU minus 120 on the money line, minus 1.5 on the spread to win the Big 12 championship. Now, I saw somebody, the voice of the Sun Devils, Tim Healy, his son, Joe, who is awesome. He tweeted out something that I think is very important, and it was something that I saw earlier this week that I think it needs to be discussed with us as a show. Because tomorrow is going to be the Dr. Pepper Big 12 championship game. You know what that means? That means at halftime, they're going to roll out the big cans of Dr. Pepper with the hole in the middle, and we're going to get the football chucking contest. And there's going to be a representative from the two schools. And Joe pointed this out on Twitter. I'm pretty sure it was Joe. So if I'm giving credit to Joe for something that somebody else said, I apologize. But I'm pretty sure it was Joe. The person that represents ASU, I don't want to see the chest pass, okay? You better be slinging it like Sam Levitt's slinging it. I don't want to see the basketball chest pass for you to try to win the scholarship. You better be slinging it in there like you're Joe Burrow on Monday night or you're Sam Levitt tomorrow afternoon, okay? That's what I want to see when halftime rolls around. You need to represent your university very well tomorrow. That's the more important thing other than ASU playing tomorrow. I think ASU wins. I think they're the better football team. I do. They're playing well. They've handled every bit of adversity and pressure that has faced them this year. I think they win. These teams are really close. I look at how they've handled the last couple of weeks. ASU has looked better resume-wise. I think they win. I think they win, and this run continues.